from a IT business standpoint, we're really focused on those people who don't have a great relationship with IT. And that can be just your technology doesn't work well. It can be that you don't like your provider. It can be you don't understand it and you're just shoving it off to somebody else, and you could be really in a risky place. We want to improve that relationship. We want to change how people perceive IT and work with IT and how to use it as a business driver, truly. So anybody in that film, and one of the things that we've been saying a lot is people have this perception that like changing providers is really difficult. In today's world, it's not that hard. We've just launched a guarantee. If we can onboard you if you're a small business under like 30 users, 1 week, or it's free. And it's not that hard. It's not that hard to change. And you should have a better relationship to the point where you should know all of that.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Going Beyond the Deal podcast. Today, we have my dear friend and someone I'd consider my older brother, Mr. Darek Hahn. Darek is the CEO of Affinity. He's going to be talking about his early life and getting into the IT field and the power of building a team. His upcoming book, Team We, drops in the next couple of months. Excited to hear some of the wisdom that he's going to drop on the podcast today. So without further ado, the great Darek Hahn. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Going Beyond the Deal podcast. Today, I have my longtime friend, Mr. Darek Hahn, CEO of Affinity IT. Am I saying that the right way? I know your old company. I know your new company. So I want to make sure I'm saying it the right way.
It's Affinity. It's simple.
Affinity. Okay. I'm making it. I'm putting too much prominence on the IT part. Affinity. Okay. That's better.
And my point in that whole thing, I always said if I ever ran an IT company, IT would be in the name.
That makes sense. I know of another company that you used to run that had the IT in the name as well. So very good.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about. So, Darek and I have been friends now for, just to give the listeners a little bit of a backstory, we've probably known each other probably over, I don't know how many years, 5, 7?
Or not. It's pre-COVID. Probably 3 years before COVID we met.
Okay. All right. So we're getting close to a decade of friendship. But the one thing that I always say about Darek is he was the person that introduced me to Charles Scott, who I've had on the podcast before. I know a lot of the listeners enjoyed that, but Darek was the person that made that introduction. And, it definitely changed my life in a very positive way. So, being in your life and being a part of your life and, being a trusted advisor to you in your various, businesses that you've worked in has always been a pleasure for me. And we always get to go out to lunch at this great diner in East Windsor by Darek's house. So I always think of that place when we get together. But Darek, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I'm always busy, and I know you're always busy. So like when sometimes I text you and I don't get a text back for a while, or I don't get a call back, and I said, "Hey, you want to jump on the podcast on Monday with me?" And you got back to me right away. So I said, "Let's do it."
Yeah, it's funny you brought Charles because I just had a call with him this morning, and we were talking about this is I had to learn this from my mother, that one of my skills is to connect people, and I have to lean into that and allow it to happen. And it's been a biggest gift of my life, watching other people connect and go on and do whatever they do together. I do that to somebody else that works with Charles. She's doing mentoring like he does. I've connected her with probably 5 women. It's just a fun thing to do.
And before we actually, pressed record on this, we were talking about someone that I had connected Darek with through something, and then a business opportunity came from it. So it's like one of those things where it's just this endless flywheel of opportunities that we get through introductions, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So, and then just to add a little bit more, besides Darek and I knowing each other just through business, we both have worked with the Association for Corporate Growth. We put on a quarterly dinner series for middle market CEOs and middle market CFOs. So I get to have dinner with Darek at least 8 times a year, in addition to our lunches and whatnot. So, hey, let's get into, I'd love to hear a little bit about, kind of your story. I mean, I've heard it a bunch of times, but just for the listeners, can you give us kind of a little bit of your background, and then how did you end up where you are today?
So maybe I'll start with where I'm at today and work back a
We
little
could
bit.
do that. We could go backwards.
So just, currently I'm the CEO of Affinity. We're a company we just started last summer. And it was the outgrowth of a sale of a company called Velocity, which was my old company. And we'll get into that in more detail. But short history, just I grew up in California. I'm a transplant to New Jersey almost 30 years ago. I can't believe it. And I'm never going back because I'm married to a Jersey girl.
And she does not want to go to California, I'm sure.
No, she wants no part of California. And today I realized that I really like green. And if you don't know it, California is not green. It's fairly brown unless you get in certain pockets of California. But you can ask just an introduction of who I am. I do a lot of fun stuff. I run, I bike, I swim, I fly, I write, I do gardening, home improvements. The list goes on. I'm really
and skiing.
Yeah, skiing, that too. I
was going to say you're a big skier. So.
Living life to the fullest.
Very good.
So, yeah.
So get into kind of where you are today, and then if you want to kind of go back to California and then kind of where we got there. So currently CEO of Affinity, and before that Velocity. So not to be confused, but how did you get into the IT business?
So fascinating, as I never planned on that. I actually graduated from San Diego State with a history degree. I was going to go to theological seminary and become a pastor. That didn't happen. Michael just found that out. But didn't happen. Realized that wasn't what I really wanted to do with life. Tried to figure out what I was going to do with that history degree, which wasn't going to get me anything. A company I was working for was relocating in New Jersey, and they offered me to relocate and do a project for them. I had gotten to know the CEO pretty well. So I took a chance, came out here, thought I'd be here for a couple of years and then go back to California, and that job turned into a second job here. In both those jobs, I had IT report to me. And so I learned about IT providers. And throughout my career, pretty much every job I've had, the IT department or IT company is reported to me. In that second job, I got my IT certifications. Realized that I'm not a troubleshooter. It's not my skill set. I'm more of I like to talk. I like to be around people.
But so what were the original, why were you originally hired for those companies then? And then how, that's helpful for everybody to know.
Sure. So the first company was relocating. I got hired to handle the building of an R&D center. They had a research division in San Diego, a development division in Fort Texas. The company was headquartered out of France. We brought all three of those groups together to a new R&D center in New Jersey, built here in Cranberry, where I live still. We built a beautiful facility, lots of money, not very good management. And I think the French company didn't really want the U.S. based. The R&D group in France really didn't want the U.S. based R&D. It was folding about 10 years later. Spent a lot of money. But in that process, there was a company that came in to look at our building as an example of a building they could build in the park. And as I was walking around the building with one of the people or one of the group that was looking at our building, I just asked what they were doing. And they said they were going to build this big facility. And I said, no, I'd be interested in helping out with that. Turned into a job where I helped build a laser diode factory for a company called Instant Lightwave. They were spun out from Sarnoff Research. If you know, Sarnoff Research was the original RCA TV research development group over in Princeton. We spun out Princeton Lightwave, built a beautiful production facility, and I learned a valuable lesson on how to blow $54 million and have really nothing to show for it. It was the end of the dot-bomb period, and we were a year or two late to the market, and we didn't have great leadership, and ended up selling two parts of the company for $10 million. Moved into another facility, and actually that's where I got my IT certifications and learned a lot about. In that environment, I learned a lot about the startup world, about how you can really blow money and how you can really not see what's happening.
So how are they blowing the money then?
just spending more than it was also the period, right? In the early 2000s, people were throwing money at companies to try to grow in the .com period. And there was so much broadband being laid and fiber being laid that these little laser diodes that we're making were going to fit in those environments. And we had some pretty amazing scientists that had set world records and things. And the problem is we didn't have real good leadership that really focused us on what are we trying to get to. It was interesting because the company that bought the two parts of the business was a German company that came in and they were structured. I learned a lot about watching them from an operational standpoint. It was you don't go in that fabrication facility without that production mindset. Like they didn't allow any of the R&D guys in there. We used to allow them in there all the time and they'd be tinkering with machines. You can't do that in production. So valuable lessons.
So out of all the valuable lessons, if you could go back now with everything that you learned, do you think you would have been able to have more of a successful result in it? Or do you think it was a fool's mission?
That's a good question because the ultimate, if I was there at the beginning and had the right team, I think, yes, it would have been a different situation because we would have got to market quicker.
Yeah.
Problem is they built out a lot of things that they didn't need to because they didn't have the right team and everybody was operating on their own. So you had an operations guy, you had an R&D guy, you had a development guy, you had all these different people, but they weren't working as a team because they didn't really have a strong CEO.
Yeah.
I think it's really about the team. And it's a big part of what I'm.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's so funny because I've always known you as, my friend that's in IT, right? But I always think of you more as a leader and operator first, right? I know you're in IT, but I think of you as more as someone that, can strategically kind of put something together. And that's what I've always thought that really, really, made you special. And listen, we're going to talk about your book that's coming out and everything as well. But that's one of your biggest strong suits is, I always say all the time, like, I'm not the guy that can sit there and build, I don't find a lot of joy in building financial models and all that kind of stuff. I'm more the guy that I just like being connecting. I like hearing about businesses and then finding a way to be a helpful resource in that. And with you, I've always just seen you as a brilliant operator and someone that can kind of conduct the orchestra.
Well, and I wouldn't call myself a brilliant operator. I know when to listen to others. That's what I've learned in my career. It's really the orchestration part, I think, is important. As a leader, you're really bringing people together because you can't do everything. And a lot of people try to do it all and they get stuck. And that's where a lot of small businesses don't get past a certain level because they don't understand they've got to give up those things and let other people do it.
Yeah, so, for sure. So do you want to get into, Velocity, talk a little bit about Velocity, kind of, the story of what happened there? It's been a very interesting, couple of years together, right? I remember, sitting on the breezeway of my old home near Princeton, talking to you about, the growth of Velocity. And then all of a sudden one day we got some really exciting news. So if you want to kind of get into the story of Velocity and, how that kind of landed to where you are today.
So I should tell a little bit before it and how we ended up with Velocity, because in that journey, after I got that second job, then I worked for a couple other companies, and I really found that I really loved startups. And I had done a number of business plans earlier in my life. I had looked at a couple of restaurants to own. I had even talked about building a swim team that would have been a private business. I had built these, and always the business plans ended up fizzling out for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Just was clear it wasn't a good idea or whatever. There was a reason to stop. Well, in 2011, I left the startup I was working for before I came to the precursor of Velocity. And that company was my IT provider. And they asked me if I wanted to work on a project. And I worked on that project, which turned into a second project, which turned into a full-time job as director of project services. And then I went through a year later, got throat cancer, went through a rough time. Came out of that, realized that I was now working for a lifestyle company, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it wasn't something I really wanted to be part of. I want to be a part of growth and startup, and I just love that environment. And so I started talking to people about changing jobs and going somewhere else. And someone came to me and said, "Hey, rather than go somewhere else, why don't we buy the company?" And I went, huh? And that started the business plan development again. And this time it wouldn't die. It just wouldn't die. Every time I thought, oh, here it is. Here's the area where it's going to go. Something would pop up. For example, I got to a point where we had a plan put in place and the person who was helping me said, we need to find an investor. I'm like, how am I going to find an investor? My wife, who also runs and does triathlons and things like that, met a new running person out at the Jersey Shore and went out to run with her for the first time and says to her, oh, my husband's trying to do this. He's trying to buy, an IT company, blah, blah. He should talk to my husband. My husband used to be in IT. That was Thursday. Friday, we have a conversation. The next Friday, he says, I'm in. I'll be your lead investor. And just things like that kept happening. And in 2016, we bought the company, and the owners were in a great guys. They just were in a bad marriage, and it was three partners who had I think they were together at that point 15, 16 years, maybe even longer. And it was just dissolving, and it wasn't going well. And I even had one of them at one point when I was talking to him said, "Hey, you got $1 million? I'll sell you my shares. I want out." That's how bad it was.
Why? What do you think caused that?
Lack of clarity on roles. Lack of clarity on where you want to go in the beginning. They didn't know in the beginning where they wanted to go. They also, probably none of them were real leaders. They were all tech guys that came, and that's hard. And that's hard in our business. We have a lot of IT service providers that are led by tech guys that don't understand the business side of it.
Yeah.
So bought the company in 2016, didn't realize they hadn't right-sized it after they lost a big contract. So mistake number one that we made is we didn't ask for financials in the last month or two, and they didn't right size their company when they lost their contract. We did offer them less money, so it cost us less. But when we walked in, we really needed to lay off probably 3 or 4 people right away, and we didn't do that. And so we struggled the first 2 years, almost didn't make it. That partner came in and operated as our COO. He saved us from that perspective because he understands the operation side. What that did for me is made me realize what I'm really good at, which is the sales and the vision and the forward-looking part of it. And so we went through a whole transition there 2 years before COVID. 16, 17 were not great years. 18, we had 20% growth. We were really hitting it, which not too many IT providers make that kind of growth. And then COVID hit. And right before COVID hit, I had gone to Las Vegas for an event.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't normally listen to cybersecurity guys because they tend to sell with fear. And I don't really like that. I don't think that's productive. But
I don't like it either.
People get scared and they start buying stuff. And unfortunately, in the cyberspace, you can buy a lot of stuff and still be not secure.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in a meeting room. There's about 100 of us IT providers in this room. And the next talk was going to be cybersecurity. And I was doing some work. I didn't have another talk to go to. So I thought I'll just sit in the back corner and do my work. He got up on the stage. And the first thing he said is, how many of you have had have had a cyber audit on yourself? And not a single hand when the room went up.
Wow. And
this is 2018, 19. I can't remember. When did COVID start?
2020.
2020. So 19, fall or August of 2020 or 2019. And, I just kind of looked around the room. By the way, my hand didn't go up either. And I looked around the room and went, "Ooh, that's scary." And when I came home, I had 2 thoughts. One, we're starting an audit, which we did. We got a partner and we asked them to start looking at what we're doing and making sure that we're secure. And 2 is, this is a great marketing opportunity. This is why I know I'm a sales guy. There's a marketing opportunity here. If all those people in the room don't have an audit, and we do, they're a leg up on people.
Yep.
A month later, somebody in Maryland, an IT provider, 100 clients or so, got hit. And all of their clients got hit. And they were out of business. And so it really stirred the pot for me on the cybersecurity side. And we went into COVID trying to figure out what we're going to do, obviously, because everybody's just scrambling to stay alive during COVID. And in the midst of that, a guy I know out of Nashville sent me a note and said, "Hey, there's a guy in Phoenix that's got a cybersecurity firm that's looking to acquire an IT provider."
Mm.
it kind of fits in with what I'm doing here. And so we started having conversations, and their idea was they were going to merge a number of IT providers. They had, at that point, they had one. We were going to be number two. They ended up acquiring four more. So we ended up being 6 of us, and they merged them in as a division of a larger cybersecurity firm. Great idea. Wonderful idea. Not so good implementation. And so the IT providers did merge, but unfortunately they tried to run it like a $1 million IT provider, and they were now 20 million in revenue, and they abandoned a lot of process and procedure that a $20 million business of any kind needs to have.
Yeah.
So it floundered. I worked there for 2 years, and that journey taught me some valuable lessons, especially around when I bring up team and people, and we talk about in the book, it's all about the we. There's a lot of me, I stuff in a company like that, because there was all these companies that came together. And so really watched how when an IT tech would leave, how quickly the clients they were primarily assigned to would also leave. And that the relationships are so important. In technology, we haven't thought about relationships that much. It's just that stuff. It's the computer. It's, make it running. So when we formed Affinity, the new company, we made it our primary vision is around genuine relationships, genuine relationship with your. So for us, it's with our employees, with our clients, with our partners, and with technology. Yeah. There is a relationship with technology. And most people, if you ask them, how's your relationship with technology, they'll roll their eyes and go, oh, right. I want to change that. Technology should be helping us. We shouldn't be at the behest of technology. Technology should be at the behest of us. And the relationship is kind of backwards, where we're scrambling to keep up with technology rather than staying ahead of it and using it. So one of the things I ask people today is simple thing. AI is coming with you, like it or not, if you own a business. And I bet you half your employees are using it and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
Small businesses who don't have an AI policy are in danger.
Why is that?
So I'll use an example. So danger, there's a security risk there. So if you use a free version of ChatGPT, all data you put into it is on the internet.
Oof.
Because it's free. Just think about Google, or not Google, but Facebook and social media. They give you a free account because they have your data. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to secure your data, they'd make you pay for it.
Yeah.
Which is why there's a paid version of ChatGPT.
Yep. So
that's the danger part of it. The other part of it is how many people don't realize that their employees are working about half time because they're using AI. A great example. I showed up at an event and I was talking to a guy about this, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm firing my marketing guy." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because he's only working 2 hours a day." I said, "How'd you know?" He said, "Well, I called him in the afternoon. He's never available in the afternoon." So we started snooping a little bit. You can track what people are doing on their computer. And so he would turn on his computer at 9:00 in the morning. He'd turn it off at 11 and never see him again the rest of the day. I said, "Really? Is he doing his job?" "Well, yeah, he's posting everything we've asked him to post. He's doing everything we're asked to post." I said, "Well, what's he doing?" He gets up in the morning, he uses ChatGPT, he gets all his work done in 2 hours, and he goes out and has fun the rest of the day. I said, "So you're going to fire him?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You might want to think about, you just fired your most efficient employee. And you might teach the rest of your employees how to use it and be more efficient." And it was an aha moment for him. And it was an aha moment for me, because the bad thing of that whole story is that employee was putting all their data on free ChatGPT. So all their data was out. So that was if they had a policy, that would have been a fireable offense.
Yeah.
But they don't have a policy. So we're big proponents of, you need to put the structure in place. And that's getting ahead of IT instead of being behind IT.
Got it.
So
got it. Do you mind if we just jump back real quick to something? Because we got into the AI thing, and I think it's just a valuable, some information that's valuable. I've heard you speak about this before, so I wanted to make sure the listeners got it. But, as I'm an investment banker. I do a lot of, sell-side advisory. 60% of my practice is sell-side advisory. As a seller, looking back at it when you were selling, Velocity, was there anything that you could have done or should have done to know that you were getting, you were selling the company to someone that might not be able to do what they said? Was there any warning sign? Was there anything you should have done? Like you said with the previous, when you had bought Velocity, like, oh, we didn't look at the last 2 months of financial statements to know that they were losing a big client, right? Is there anything looking back on that you would have said, you know what, anybody that's ever going to sell their business to somebody else, like this is something that I would definitely look at?
So I would start with, you have to look at yourself. I'm a big proponent when we talk about the book, that's looking at the three fingers pointing back at you when you're pointing a finger at somebody else.
Yeah.
So we were in a situation where we had taken on a fairly large SBA loan, and it was hindering us from growth.
Yep.
And that to me, and there were people's houses tied up with that. And we were at 5 years. We had said we were going to do this for 5 years. And so there was a lot of push from us internally to get those personal guarantees off. And they were going to pay off this SBA loan. So it was a big plus for us, right? So there's a lot of emotional entanglement in all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I know for me, it drove the decision more significantly. Plus, I was in a situation from a leadership standpoint where I really couldn't make the decisions that needed to be made. I wouldn't do this again. We had a board that was made up of a lot of friends and family. Okay. And it had a splintered board because some were supporting me, some supported the COO. There was a lot of dysfunction in that relationship, I'd just say. And so there was a lot of emotional baggage on our side when we went in to sell. And that made us put blinders on to some of the stuff that we probably saw. So if you can remove that, I would say the thing that I would have looked at more carefully is the operational side of the business. So just as you go in to buy something, if you're going in to buy a company, you tend to realize that there's probably going to be some stuff under the covers you're going to find after you buy it.
Yep.
And that it's probably not run as well, or if they're not hitting their EBITDA numbers, they're probably not run that well.
Yeah.
That are standard in the industry. So you're going to have to deal with that. In this situation, we didn't look a lot at the operations because we were number 7 that was acquired, and they hadn't really done a lot of integrating things. We were the second IT provider that came in. So we were the first one that we actually forced the integration into the other provider because that's what we expected. We're going to integrate. Well, it turns out they really weren't doing that. Like a lot of the other companies were keeping their head and they were just doing their thing off by themselves. Now, if you want to run the business that way, that would have been fine. But the message was we're going to merge and we're going to bring all this stuff together and we're going to save money. And they didn't lay a single person off. So a lot of things like I would have been asking, like, you have the same headcount after buying 6 other companies. That doesn't make sense. Usually you lose some accounting people or something. Just the economies of scale. So I think we had blinders on. If there was anything, I would say, if I had to give one thing for people to look at when they go in and acquire, and probably to some extent happened when we bought Velocity, is we got excited about the sale, right? We were close to the end. We didn't ask that last question right before. And it had been a couple of months since they'd lost a contract. We knew they lost a contract, but we didn't know they had not right-sized it. And they played some games, which it's our fault we didn't look. Not paying themselves and things like that to pay the employees. So they didn't have to be the ones laying off employees.
Yeah. It's interesting, I mean, because we see that all the time with people. And it's even more important when the proceeds of the sale of the company are going to be, kind of put into the growth of the next company, right? And you're expecting to get your big payday from the growth of the company. And it's a big difference in if somebody's just going to say, hey, I'm going to write you a check for $20 million. If you stay, you stay. If you go, you go. It's fine. You got your 20 million, you're happy. But when you're, the proceeds from the sale are wrapped up in, what's to go forward, that's what makes things really, really, really challenging.
Well,
so you said the original board that you had for Velocity was made up with a lot of friends and family. When you started Affinity, I know some of the board members that sit, just mutual friends of ours and everything. How did you go about that differently this time?
So we didn't have a relationship going in, right? So they are not family members. They're not friends. They have become colleagues, and I would call one of them definitely a friend, and both of them actually. So we currently only have 3 people on the board: myself, David, who you know, and a gentleman named Mike. Edwards, who's out in California. And it's a business relationship.
Yeah.
And when we talk at board meetings, it's a business discussion. We're friends. We talk about, our families and all that stuff. But when it comes down to it, the decisions are based on friendships, not on business. I think a lot of what we had, and you get this a lot, I've heard in boards where, what do they say? 20% will do all the work. The others show up. We had a couple of people on the board at Velocity who just showed up. And they picked a side and they just supported that side and didn't really dig in and get involved and really find out what was going on.
And I think for you, the one thing that I would say, and I feel bad talking about David Barnett, when he's not here, right? But we're speaking positively about him. But, David has had expertise and experience, in M&A, in the IT and technology space, right? So it's one of those things where you and I say it all the time, right? Like, we might not be the smartest guy in the room, but we know what we're good at, right? So when we're trying to put together our team, let's get guys that are more experienced in certain sides of doing that, right? So I know your other board member who you've mentioned before, has that financial acumen, that, banking background that's helpful to you in layering in the strengths that you need to be, very, very successful with it.
So we haven't talked a lot about my personal background, but I'm a big believer in pay attention.
Yeah.
The universe puts, whatever you want to call it, if you're religious, it's God, whatever. The universe puts people in your life at the right time, at the right place, if you pay attention. Yeah. And David was a pay attention moment. So David and I had lunch in probably 2015, 16, 17, somewhere right around the time that, maybe I've been 18, but in the time we were doing Velocity. We met, we had lunch, we had a great time. Didn't see him again. We got through COVID. We're getting ready to sell. And one of my mentors, Roger Miller, who I think you know, I'm telling him what we're talking about doing. And he says, you really should talk to David Barnett. And I said, oh, I haven't talked to him in ages. Why? He said, I think you'll find out that he's the right guy to talk to. So I reached out to him and said, hey, you want to have lunch? We had lunch. And that's when I found out I didn't know his back history. Amazing story of starting an IT provider in the 90s when you were putting computers on people's desks for the first time. Running a game of chance company, the McDonald's Monopoly game. Running a company that did that, sold it to NBC Universal, bought it back, sold it again, pivoted, did a new role, and now sold that in 21 or 2. Yeah. So he's been an ideal for us around that. And good for me as a leader with somebody on board, because I think one of the important things that I didn't have in the past experience was a person on the board who had run their own company. Yeah. And could give me the advice on how to manage that and when I have to be a hard ass and when you don't have to be a hard ass. Because I struggle with being the hard ass. I like to be nice.
No, you're always nice unless you're busy and I text you and you're like, you call me and then you miss my call for 5 minutes. I'm like, I'm just as busy as you are, Darek. Just kidding. Just kidding. So let's talk about what's next for Affinity, and the one thing that the reason why you and I both lead by a lot of the same principles. The reason I started doing this podcast was to be a helpful resource to the guests that I have on here. So what are the goals for Affinity? Who out there in the listener space would you want to speak to? What are the future plans for Affinity? And then how can this platform be helpful to you in growing the business?
So from a IT business standpoint, we're really focused on those people who don't have a great relationship with IT. And that can be just your technology doesn't work well. It can be that you don't like your provider. It can be you don't understand it and you're just shoving it off to somebody else, and you could be really in a risky place. We want to improve that relationship. We want to change how people perceive IT and work with IT and how to use it as a business driver, truly. So anybody in that film, and one of the things that we've been saying a lot is people have this perception that changing providers is really difficult. In today's world, it's not that hard. We've just launched a guarantee. If we can onboard you if you're a small business under 30 users, 1 week, where it's free. And it's not that hard. It's not that hard to change. And you should have a better relationship to the point where you should know all of that. Like you say, if you ask your IT provider for a document and it takes them 2 weeks to get it, that means they don't have the document. They're creating it.
Scrambling to make it. Yeah.
And a lot of small IT providers do that. And I saw it when we bought when we bought Velocity, that they had some of those going on. So it's a genuine relationship. I want to have a genuine relationship with people. So if somebody's looking just for help in IT, like I don't know what to do, I'll talk to them. I don't have to sell them. If we're the right fit, great. If we're not, I wouldn't want you to do business with somebody that's not the right fit.
Yeah. So how are you getting that message out there, right, to the masses, right? Because it's one of those things, right? Unfortunately, it's the same thing in banking, right? It's like it feels like this commodity service that everybody provides. How are you guys differentiating yourselves, and how are you getting that message out to the market to know that you guys are more than just the guys putting computers on the desk and making sure that they work?
To me, it's the face-to-face relationship. It's conversations like this. It's getting in front of people and really having a understanding that I'm not here to sell you something. I want to help you have a better experience and be secure. And so many people think they're secure, but they don't have any documents. Like I would say, great example. I am a big believer that if you hire a company like mine and we're doing IT support for you, we should not be auditing ourselves. In banking, you wouldn't have the auditor be your employees, right?
Yeah.
Right? Well, IT, it should be the same thing. Like somebody from the outside should be coming and looking to see if we are doing our job. And if we're not, we should be willing to say we're not. Yeah. And if the provider's not willing to say they're not, then that makes me nervous, right? Because I'm believing being humble and knowing that we don't know everything, and IT is a big field. And I want somebody to tell me, hey, you're missing this spot. Oh gosh, we need to fix that. Thank you for showing me that, right?
Yeah.
And fix it. Versus trying to hide and dance around it, which is for a lot of years, IT's been that way. So, I forgot the beginning of your question. Sorry about that.
No. It's okay. I was just, how do we get this message out to the market, right? Because you start kind of getting, the one thing that I always say is like, I believe in the face-to-face as well. And it's just telling the story, right? I'm trying to do the same thing, right? Where, I'm out there trying to serve the, lower middle market to upper middle market, right? Because there's a lot of businesses out there that deserve to have the same high quality IT service, right? That the big companies have, right? And they should be able to get that same type of service, right? That's what I'm trying to provide in the M&A space, because there's a lot of great companies right here in New Jersey that are out there that need to have someone behind them to help walk them through the process, right? But unfortunately, when you're in a commoditized business like IT, banking, payroll, whatever it is, you just kind of get lost in the wash sometimes.
Well, I think that's because of the way IT's developed and the way we've shoved it into corporations. I look back in the 90s and early 2000s, it was throw a computer on a desk and there wasn't really much structure in how you were going to use it. It hasn't been seen, except for at the enterprise level, as a business driver. So I have a friend that's doing an implementation of it in NetSuite right now. And I've said to him, so what are you hoping to get out of it? I want it to do the same thing my old system did. I'm like, well, then why are you buying it?
Yeah.
He's like, well, my old system's old. I need something new. I'm like, but it should be a business driver. So how do you create that business driver? So a lot of we'll talk about it's like, if you're going to do a NetSuite implementation, great. Let's talk about what are your goals with it, one. And two, how is it going to help you grow? What efficiencies are you going to put in place? Do you have somebody you're assigning to this tool so they go to all the industry events and learn more about what it can do for you? Or are you just throwing it in there and going to go, hope it works? Which is a lot of what happens, right? A lot small businesses do this a lot. They throw the system in there going, I hope it works. And they haven't really done the homework. And it's hard.
It's interesting. Right? It's interesting that people are like, okay, I just have an old system, so we just got to throw in something new. And it's like, well, you're not looking at what's going to drive it to the next level. Very, very interesting.
But if you think about it from a person who's running let's say a manufacturing company.
Yeah.
Doing service, they're just trying to pump out widgets.
Yeah.
All they want is a system that helps them keep pumping out widgets.
Yeah.
If the system causes that system causes them any hiccups in pumping out widgets, it's not a good system. 100% agree. But if that system could create an opportunity for you to pump out double the amount of widgets, then you would be in a different place. And that's where we as IT people have failed our small businesses, I think. We don't provide them that piece. We just provide them a new widget tool. And they keep putting out the same amount. So we're not providing value in a business sense. We're providing IT value. That's it. So.
Makes sense. So let me ask you, because I'm excited to hear about this. You and I have been kind of trading war stories in writing books here, but let's talk about Team We and, your new book. Let us know when it's being released, but, what was the real driver in creating that book? I mean, for someone like, it's funny, right? When I talk to you, it's like, well, what are you working on now? It's like, well, what are we not working on? We're always so busy. What made Darek Hahn put another thing on his plate?
So I would start with giving back. Is the behind it all is I've been lucky to live a very blessed life, and it didn't start that way. So I have to go back a little bit to where I started in California, growing up and having a messed up view of life, and got myself in a lot of trouble. And by the time I was 23, I had drug and alcohol problem and spent some time with some metal bracelets and just really made a mess of my life. Yeah. And when I had enough, and I said, "Uncle," and someone helped me. And it was, somebody saying, "Get help or get lost," really. And I went and reached out and got help. And those people turned my life around.
Yeah.
And in that process, I made it through all of that, cleaned up my record, got everything cleaned up. I went back to college, got a college degree. I was 23, so I wasn't that far out of college. I was lucky that it happened that early. A lot of people don't have it happen until later in life. In my 30s, I moved out here to New Jersey and ended up in these amazing jobs and meeting some amazing people, to the point where we bought the company, sold the company, started another company now. And I've realized how important the people in my life have been. Mm-hmm. At the same time, pre-COVID, I had been thinking about writing a book about, and I'll be honest, the title at that point was going to be Jail the CEO, because I had gone through that journey. And
it's funny. It doesn't have as good of a ring as.
It was. And I talked to an editor. The editor said, "You can write that book and it'll be fine, but it'll be a very limited audience." And she said, "Just take some time and think about how could you broaden that audience? What does that look like?" And when we went into COVID, I realized, and it's the beginning of the book, I talk a lot about that journey. I was actually on a plane from New Jersey to go through Houston and then to Reno. And I was going out to California to see my mother, who's at the end of her life. And on the way to Houston, they canceled the NBA season. And on the way from Houston to Reno, they canceled the Final Four. And I got to Reno and went, I'm not going to see my mom because I've been on a plane. And I'm sitting in Reno by myself alone, terrified, not knowing if I can even go home. I don't know what's going to happen. My wife's not happy because she didn't really want me to go. And by the way, my wife's a doctor and she knew all of what was going on. I wasn't listening to her. And so I stayed in Reno for a couple of days. I did go skiing for a day because I couldn't do anything else. And that Saturday night, they closed all the ski resorts. And Saturday during the day, there was a huge snowstorm. So I had already rearranged my flight, and I got on a flight to go home on Sunday morning. And so
you got home okay?
Well, part of the story is I was at the Denver airport. So I flew from Reno to Denver and then Denver to New Jersey. And in Denver, I had to go, if you've ever been to the Denver airport, it's got these tunnels with the tram. And I went to go get on the tram, and one of my friends that I ski with walks up to me out of the blue with a mask on, had been in Salt Lake skiing and was doing the same flight I was back to New Jersey. He had the mask on and everything. He actually got COVID and almost died. And I sat there watching people, and I tend to be a people watcher because I'm fascinated with people. And I realized how those that were with people had a much easier time, even though everybody was scared. Everybody was having a hard time.
Yeah.
I was by myself and I was scared. Like, what do I breathe? Do I not breathe? Do I put a mask on? Do I not put a mask on? One lady sitting next to me is slathering gel all over herself because she thinks that's going to stop it. I don't know what's going to stop it. But I got home and I realized that, we have forgotten we. And I've watched it in my life since the 80s when I think we became a me, I on my stuff society.
Yeah.
And we forgot about the people in our life. We've abandoned things like the Lions Club and the Elks Club and all those things that community used to do. We've kind of walked away from them. Now there's certain communities that still do it. Obviously, that's a hasty generalization, but I believe there's a sickness in us where we're detached from people. So the whole premise of the book is from my recovery, looking at how working those steps in recovery allowed me to create a wonderful, amazing team that has helped me get to where I'm at today. How could I give that back to more than just the recovery community, which I'm very active there, but outside of that community? And I created a step program. It's 8 steps. And it's really, and I said this earlier, it's really about looking at the 3 fingers pointing back at ourselves.
Yeah.
If you look at social media, I've been watching a situation in our town where there's so much focus on that finger pointing at you. They're doing this, they are doing this, and no focus on what are you doing?
Yeah.
Have you gone up at a town meeting? Have you got involved? We've got to start looking at ourselves. The only way we're going to correct what's going on in our society right now and the toxicity that's going on is that we start looking at ourselves and our own behavior. Yeah. So this book is all about looking at yourself, and it's been an interesting journey. A book is, as I told you, the original title of the book was The Power of We. And then I found that there's a really well-written book called The Power of We that Bill Clinton actually wrote the intro to. So I don't think I'm going to be able to compete with that. So we changed the name of the book. Cool. It's the same concept, though.
When's the book coming out, and how can people get a hold of it?
So the plan is for it to be out in end of August.
End of August?
Yeah.
Where's it
going
to be available and everything? Where can people? Amazon. Okay.
Published. I will say that I just gave it to my 7 trusted friends to read, and one of them came back and said, "You might want to do a little more work on it." So it might be a September.
Yeah. It's really interesting just on the publishing thing. This is just a total aside. I was talking to Dr. Michael Johnson, the president of the New Jersey Innovation Institute. We were talking about publishing a book, and he was talking about the route of going with a publisher or self-publisher. And the thing with going with a publisher is they literally will water down your book to fit this niche that it starts to slowly become what you didn't want it to be. So it's like, if the purpose is to help people, right, in the authentic way that you want to help people, not make money, right? With the reason why I'm writing a book is to help people. The reason you're writing a book is to help people. Just self-publish the darn thing, Yeah.
It's a learn. So my brother-in-law has written, I can't remember, 25, 30 books, maybe more. Yeah. In the evangelical world, and does a book writing course. And it's I've done it for the last 2 years. It's going to start next week from this year. And it's 1 hour once a month, or 2 hours once a month. And then an hour with a writing group. Mm-hmm. And it's really focused on the process of writing a book. And it starts, the first session is on how to write. Second session's on, building a book. And then the third one starts on marketing and how to market a book, and the whole Amazon, and there's other places you can do it. And it's a fascinating journey, and it got me started with, I could do this. And it's just, they call it BIC, butt in chair. You have to get your butt in the chair and write. And over a period of, I was almost a year, because I wrote it in one format. And then when I came back and talked to my editor, the editor's like, I don't think that format's going to work. So we had to rearrange it. And that's what caused the new, you need to have somebody else read it, because when we rearranged it, some of it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. I think I shared with you recently that I've always enjoyed performing. I've always enjoyed, performing on stage, speaking on stage. So I really, really want to continue to get better at public speaking. And then I took a public speaking course, and everything that I thought I should talk about now I realize that I shouldn't, because now I know what the audience is. So you continue to learn. But this has been really great, Darek. Before we wrap up, I have two things for you. So how can people get in touch with you and Affinity, just in general? Just, I know you as a helpful IT resource for someone's looking to at least, think about other providers that are out there that, where you can actually have a relationship with somebody. What's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you?
Well, the simplest way would be go to the Affinity website. It's Affinity MSP, managed service provider.com. So Affinity without a Y.
Got it. We'll put it in the show notes for you.
Okay, perfect. And, or you can do an email. My email is darek.hahn@affinitymsp.com.
Cool. So, all right. So you want something? I got a surprise for you.
Oh,
it's not like a gold watch or something.
Oh, darn! I thought I was going to get something. It's going to walk in my doors.
You just won $1 million. No. So what I want to do is I wanted to come up with a cool question that I could ask every single one of my guests that comes on. So you will be the first person that we ask the question to. So you are going to set the standard for what's to come in the future. So I'm going to read it. I'll read it very slowly and carefully for you here, and then I want to get your answer.
Okay.
Darek Hahn, when you look back on your journey, personally and professionally, what's one moment that's felt small at the time, but ended up changing everything?
So I can tell you, I had it at the end of her life, an amazing relationship with my mother. And she was the one that always said, "One, you're a great salesperson. You should be a salesperson." I never wanted to be a salesperson because I watched her own her real estate office and go through the ups and downs. And I was like, I don't want that. I want a salary. And it wasn't until I owned a company where I don't have to worry about the commission structure that I became a great salesperson. But one of the things that she did to me that kind of annoyed me at the time, but I realized was very important to me, is when I was going through that period where my life had been destroyed and I moved back home to start over. I was going to school about 30 minutes away and driving every day. And she had these books on tape, cassette tapes.
Yeah.
And she handed one to me. She's like, "Why don't you listen to this on your way to school?" And it started to journey into a lot of the positive motivation people that it changed me without me really knowing it. So I listened to Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer and Zig Ziglar and all of those guys during that period. And it was a period of about 2 years before I moved to San Diego to finish school that I realized it's what we feed ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we're feeding ourselves social media, news, we're probably going to be kind of about life.
Yeah.
If I'm feeding myself that good stuff, I never knew that it would be that big of a deal. But that was such a powerful moment, a powerful time that had no idea. Actually, it was kind of innate. I didn't really want to listen to that stuff. I wanted to,
You were just doing it to appease mom, and it turned out that it was the thing that, I couldn't agree with you more, because I feel like it was interesting that you said it was like after that challenging period in your life, something very similar, with me. And I don't want to get into my own story, but, when my father passed away very suddenly in 2009, by happenstance, I met a life coach. And I was like, well, that sounds like it makes sense to me. And he started giving me all these things that he was feeding me that I started getting into. And then once I started getting there, it was insatiable, and I couldn't stop. But, well, this was a really fun conversation, my friend. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just to add one thing about that. It's funny that you say that, because our mentor this morning in that call said, "Why are you here?" And it's very easy for me to answer that question today. Whereas I wouldn't have known how to answer it before. I'm here because I want to continue to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And it's through these relationships that we have that we get to learn and grow. If I am isolated, I don't learn and grow.
And it's funny, right? Because I would agree with you wholeheartedly, because if somebody asked me years ago, "Why are you here?" And, for me, it's, I think we talk about different things that we do on a daily basis, daily practices, and people might think I'm crazy, but I cold plunge every morning. I get out of my cold plunge, and in my bare feet, I stand on the grass and I look towards the east and I say, "Please continue to shine upon me so that I can continue to shine upon the world." And what I've been put on this earth to do is just be a helpful resource to others. And the more I lean into that, the more good things come to me. So,
Can I give one last tribute to my mother?
please.
So when we had her service back in California, and I'm the youngest of 9 kids, 6 of us are still around. So we start giving everybody gets up to say something. And one brother gets up, one sister gets up, one brother gets up, one sister gets up. And my mom had 3, my dad had 3, and they together had 3 more. And I'm the youngest of all of those. And as I'm listening to everybody talk, I realize that sometimes we don't even realize the gifts we get. I ended up in a period of my mother's life where my father and her divorced, and it was just me and her at home. And it was a struggling time. She was building a real estate office. I was running amok. But during that time, as I was listening to my brothers and sisters, none of them got the one experience that I got to be there when she was building the business.
Huh.
And as I had a whole plan of what I was going to say, and I threw it out the window and said, I didn't realize that she'd given me this gift, that running a business was something you could do and that you didn't have to be scared of it. Just go do it. And it's such a gift. Do
you think that was probably one of the big drivers for you to be an entrepreneur yourself?
It is now. I fought it for a long time because of that thing. I want a salary.
Yeah.
It was more that my family was not good with it. There's a lot of detail there, but there's more about my family not being very good with finances. My dad filing bankruptcy multiple times, and that's what I was taught growing up. Yeah. So it wasn't until just before I got married, I worked with somebody to get my finances cleaned out. And then with my wife, who's very good with finances, that's not a concern for me today. So it makes it easier. So. I know you want to wrap up. We could probably talk for hours. But.
No, I know we can. I hear my 5.5-year-old running up the steps right now who wants to come in and tell me about her day. So
that's way more important than I can say.
Yeah, well, it'd be hilarious if she ran in and jumped on my lap here right now. But Darek, you've always been a great friend. I call you, you're one of my older brothers. When I went to go make big decisions in my own life, I came to you to get your opinion on it. So I certainly appreciate you as a friend and as a colleague. And thanks for joining me today.
Appreciate you too, man.